Gamers, so it is time for me to make a tier list video. It is a little bit late. I was hoping to get this out like as soon as the new World Championship Duelist Cup type event started. Unfortunately, I got strep throat, so that's why I haven't uploaded in like 4 days, but that's enough of that. Without further ado, let's get into this tier list. Now, I'm not the type of guy that likes to meander around. I don't like when we're trying to build up to something everybody knows. So let's just start off with what the whole format is built around pretty much, and that is tier limits. Of course, tier limits being tier 1 is no surprise. It is by far the best deck in the game. I mean, I could talk about it for hours. You already know this deck is the best. You see it all the time. So I don't want to meander on tier limits, but let's talk about all the other viable decks as well as not so viable decks. So starting, I guess, with not so viable, we can go for Dinos. I would put Dinos in like playable. I know a lot of my viewers love my content because of Dinos. A lot of people found my channel through Dinos, and I'm a huge fan of Dinos. I'm a huge Dino advocate, as you would say. But the thing about Dinos right now is the graveyard hate kills them. Tier limit boards are hard to out for Dinos in general. Rule Kalos alone kind of solos Dinos if they don't have a great hand, because just by stopping Misc effect, it gets kind of hard to play. So honestly, it's just not looking too good for Dinos right now. Not to say they're unplayable. They're absolutely still playable. You can get some cheeky wins going second, obviously going first. If you don't get a bad hand, like Dinos can set up insane boards, some of the most insane boards in the game. But yeah, just overall, obviously they have consistency issues, and you know, they're just not in the best place right now. I actually think once tier is kind of like phased out, Dinos might see a resurgence. They're always a really good going second option, and they're gonna get some more support down the line, so looking forward to that. For our rogue tier here, I'm gonna put what I think is like the best rogue deck, and that would be Mathmech. Now, I know Mathmech is crazy. I'm not suggesting Mathmech is not good or anything, but a lot of the graveyard hate right now affects Mathmech tremendously, so they're not in a very good spot in that regard. Of course, they have a lot of good things going for them. They're an absolutely amazing deck. They can go for game really easily. They have good plays going second, going first. They can play under Max C fairly well compared to most combo decks. So like, they're not by any means a bad deck. I just don't think they're in the right format right now, so that's why I'm putting them in rogue, because I still think you can realistically do really well with Mathmech. It's just going to take a lot of effort and a bit more grind than most other decks that are going to be like up here. So next up here, right under Mathmech, I am putting Sword Soul. So okay, this one might be a little cheeky. Some people really like Sword Soul right now, and I know some people are playing 3 Protoss. Thanks to Pac for shining light on that, playing 3 Protoss. I think that's kind of wild. The thing about 3 Protoss is it's really nice when you're playing against tier, but tier is really not the only deck you need to be thinking about in this current format. There's a lot of anti-meta decks that, while they don't like really demolish Sword Soul, like if you go like D-Shifter against Sword Soul, it's not completely unplayable. It still really hinders their plays a lot. Of course, Sword Soul has a lot of things going for them as well. They can run a lot more hand traps than most decks. They have good consistency, stuff like that. So that's why I'm putting them right under Mathmech. I still think it's a really strong deck, just not in the greatest of formats. You know, if you don't have like the greatest of matchups against tier hate and against tier, it's like I don't know. So next up here, I'm gonna put what I think is the best deck right under tier, and I think it's Naturia Runic, baby. I think Naturia Runic is insane and a little bit underrated. I've been playing with it in the Duelist Cup. I played with it today. I had a really good win rate. I'd say about like 85% win rate. So really solid stuff for Duelist Cup. It has a good matchup going into those weird like stun decks that are trying to counter tier limits, and it has a good matchup against tier limits as well. That's not to say I'm going to win every single game. Obviously, sometimes you just lose a game. It's a card game. But I've won many games on stream against tiers. So I can definitely say that this deck is really solid and absolutely capable of competing in the format. Again, I don't think this is a tier 0 format. While I do think tier stands in a tier of its own at the moment, you're actually seeing quite a huge variety of decks in the Duelist Cup, or I guess it's called the World Championship thingy qualifier. Anyway, the thing I like the most about this deck is probably just that it plays well into like matchups that are good against tier and matchups like tier elements. The one thing I hate about it is a lot of people are now playing Cyberstein in tier elements. It's almost the most popular thing I see, and then people just make an Exterio, and Exterio, yeah, Naturia Exterio, ironically, is just the biggest foil of this deck. Like, you can't play your runic cards, you can't play your evenly matches, so it's pretty tough for that. Other than that though, I've been having a really good time with this deck. Also, you know, like oftentimes tier players will just mill your shufflers for you, and then you could just shuffle their stuff back and stop them from playing. So yeah, I really like this deck. I think it's really solid. Now for a deck right under here that I think is really solid right now, I would say Exosister. Exosister is just a really good anti-meta deck right now. Exosister can play D-Shifter. It can play a lot of the like really strong graveyard hate in the game. It's the right format for Exosister, and it is just like strictly an anti-meta deck. But honestly, like not a lot of decks can play through the first turn setup of Exosisters either, even if you're not tier limits, like whether you're playing Floowandereeze, Naturia Runic, like Math Mech, whatever. Like if they get their full setup turn 1 and they get like 3-4 banishes, it gets kind of hard to like set up some advantage against them. So I definitely think this deck is really powerful right now. So I think tier 2 is pretty fair. I'm not exactly sure where I would put it in tier 2. All right, so next up here for another deck, I mean, we might as well just do this one, like do two birds, one stone. Floowandereeze obviously is still really solid. Even without the barrier statue, Floowandereeze is still just a really strong deck. Good interruptions, you know, just plays on your turn. Stops tier limit players from playing pretty much if you set up what you need to set up. Obviously, tier limit players can summon stuff in defense position against M-Pen, so that skill drain effect is not like the biggest deal in the world. But being able to set up like D-Fissure and not even care a little bit about it is kind of nasty and just kind of wins the game for free. So yeah, I don't know. This deck is just really solid. I don't think it's quite as good as Exosister personally, just because I find it to be a little bit more bricky, but it's still like a really solid option in the current format, of course. And next up, I want to mention real quick, you won't see it on the tier list at the end of the video, so shout out to those people that just skipped to the end. But I forgot to put the Labyrinth deck on the list. So Labyrinth I would put probably in about Rogue here, under Sword Soul I would say. The thing about Labyrinth is, you know, you can play a bunch of Floodgates, which is what a lot of people are doing. So people will play Floodgates and generate advantage with the traps. It's not the best yet because it doesn't have all of its support. And once it does, it's only going to go higher on the list. But I still think it's a really solid pick that you can definitely climb up with. So I think it's fair to put it in Rogue. Also, like the smart Labyrinth player will probably play Dimensional Shifter, and even though it does kind of hurt you to get your traps in the grave, it doesn't hurt you nearly as much as it hurts your opponent normally to go D-Shifter. So I think Labyrinth is in a good spot. Sadly, I forgot to put it on my little list thing here, but just imagine that Labyrinth was right here in Rogue. Okay, let's do like Numeron. I think Numeron is like at the top of playable. Like it's playable. It's Numeron. You can go second, get some Saki wins. It's kind of a weird deck, but you could definitely get lucky and just get a bunch of wins with Numeron. It's always possible. Kind of similar to Dinos, except like this one is even more focused on just going second. And honestly, Numeron can run a bit more staples because it's technically less bricky than Dinos, I guess. Although like they do really need access to their field spell to get going. All right, let's switch it up and talk about a deck that is not playable. Umi Control is garbage. Umi Control is ass. It's not good. Yes, it's a epic stun floodgate deck. Like if you want to play a deck like this, like I'm not judging, okay? I'm done judging. In this format, anything that deals with this, you have my respects. A lot of people are running evenly matched right now, which is really strong against Umi Control. And yeah, I just don't think it's in a really good spot right now. Also, a lot of people are playing Goatee. So let's talk about Goatee now. Goatee is also a reason why Umi Control is unplayable, because Goatee is actually quite good. I think it's like probably still in Rogue. Like it's not really above Rogue, but honestly, like it's kind of slept on. Like Goatee is kind of solid. It's solid for real. Like it has a pretty good matchup into tier, and similar to other anti-tier decks, it can run tier hate, so it can run graveyard hate like, you know, Dimensional Shifter and stuff like that. It gets a lot of advantage off of being banished, so when your opponents are playing a bunch of graveyard hate like Dimensional Shifter or D-Fissure, stuff like that, well, you actually get some advantage from it. So yeah, I really like Goatee. I think it's in a decent place right now, and I genuinely think you could climb with it all the way to DLV max. So yeah, don't sleep on Goatee. Very playable. Actually very playable deck. Oh, another deck I feel like I've been sleeping on for a while, but I kind of want to put in here, DDDs. I've been seeing a good amount of DDD players actually in ladder, and DDD is really hard to interrupt. Maybe it's just me not knowing the choke points, and honestly it probably is that, but I've been seeing a lot of them in like higher ranks, so obviously they're doing something right. Now I can't speak in depth about fucking DDD because I have never read a DDD card in my life, which might be why they keep beating me. But I'm at least going to give them some respect and put them in Rogue, just like, you know, just out of respect, just kind of like as a warding spell that maybe I won't have to face them anymore, or they won't be as mean to me anymore. But yeah, DDD kind of wild, kind of wildin'. Next up here, let's do Endymion. This is another deck I've been seeing a lot, and I think Endymion is in a decent spot right now. It seems quite good, but I'm not like a pendulum guy, so similar to DDD, like I don't have that much like smart commentary can give you on why this deck is doing good right now. Like the graveyard hate affects this deck as well, because like if they go D-shifter, these are not going to the pendulum zone, they're going to the banish pile. So I really don't see why they're like doing so good right now. It might just be that the selection of hand traps is a little bit different right now. People are playing more board breakers like evenly matched versus cards like imperm, so your odds of getting interrupted while you're doing your stupid pendulum combo that goes on forever, your odds of getting interrupted are lower. But I really have no idea, so I'm gonna put it in rogue because again, I've been seeing it a lot. I definitely think it's better than just playable because it's getting results. But yeah, I don't know, it's just pretty good right now. It is what it is. Okay, let's get these guys out the way. You know, Blue Eyes, Dark Magician, Cyber Dragon. Actually, let's put Dark Magician right above here. This is in order of which is most playable. So Umi Control is most playable and Cyber Dragon is the worst. Yes, Cyber Dragon decks are even worse than Blue Eyes. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I wish it was not the case, but it truly is the case. So, you know, shout out Cyber Dragon players. But yeah, these decks are unplayable. They're just cool anime decks. I've seen Dark Magician a little bit. Like I've seen it 2 or 3 times around rank 14 in the World Championship Qualifier Cup. So I mean, maybe Dark Magician players, like they're trying to figure something out. Like maybe they got something, but I don't know. Looked pretty fishy to me, and it was a pretty easy win when I saw them. So I don't know. I don't want to give it too much credit. Next up, let's do Rockets. I think Rocket is in a weird place. I'm probably going to put it in Rogue, like above Goaty, not above Sword Soul. Rockets, you know, well, Dragon Link in general, basically. Dragon Link is like, it's still good, but it's just in like, it's in a weird spot. First of all, Dragon Link is not like the highest consistency combo deck there is. A lot of people can just brick on Dragon Link, and I've seen this even from like really good players like Trishul at TTV. I've seen him brick on Dragon Link, and I know some people say, well, what if you could play with Ishizu and stuff, and it's just like, I don't know. I've yet to be convinced. The boards they set up are like glorified like Sword Soul boards. Don't get me wrong, their boards are often very hard to break. They have like really strong combos, like 1-card combos and stuff like that. So I'm not trying to sleep on the Rockets or anything. I still think this deck is really awesome. I just think in the current like landscape of the format is just a little bit weird. Still solid, can still get some wins, of course, because it is Dragon Link, but I just wouldn't feel comfortable putting it above like Sword Soul or Mathmech, especially since Sword Soul, while it does usually set up a few less interruptions, at least they have Protoss, and they also have more space for hand traps. Dragon Link has space for hand traps, but I would say not as much as Sword Soul. All right, next up, let's throw in probably my second favorite deck of the current format. Spright Melfi, I think, is in a really good place in the current format. The Melfi cards help you set up Herald of the Arclight. Herald of the Arclight basically shuts down Tearlament pretty much completely, and you can actually protect it with Avramax, and it's pretty hard for them to out the Avramax if they don't have like a Goddess of the Closed World or something like that to out the Avramax. So if they can't out Avramax, usually they can't get rid of the Herald of the Arclight, and if they can't do that, then they're in trouble. So yeah, I would say this is a really solid deck. It's also just, it's Spright. One thing I really like about this deck is, surprisingly, you can actually play Dimensional Shifter in Spright. I know, like, you don't get to do your elf stuff, you know, you don't get to really play with your graveyard, but honestly, like, sometimes just the free wins from Dimensional Shifter are kind of worth it. And going second against tier and getting to use Dimensional Shifter, and they expect Floowandereeze or some stuff, so they might go like Baguska or something, and then they pass turn, and you're playing Spright, you just go like Spright starter, start doing a bunch of stuff. Like, it can be really hard to deal with. So I definitely think Spright is in a pretty good spot right now. It's a good deck. I mean, nothing else to say really. It's just a really strong deck. Next up, let's do Strikers. I don't know why I've been seeing a lot of Strikers. I think they're better than Dinos, but like genuinely worse than Numerons. Strikers hate when people play Graveyard Hate, and also Shufflers just shit on Strikers completely, and also Strikers don't set up very much at all. So I really don't understand why so many people are playing Strikers right now. I've actually been seeing quite a few of them, and I don't really see why. They're not great. They're not great, you know, Strikers. Obviously, you can get some wins with Strikers, but like, Strikers, they kind of want to get into a grind game, and this is not the format to be getting into a grind game. Trust me, you really don't want to get into a grind game in this format. Next up here, a little honorable mention. I think heroes are basically rogue right now. Heroes have some good cards that counter tier. but they don't play very well under tier hate in general. So that kind of makes it kind of rough for them. They're still pretty playable. Honestly, this is probably a little too high for them. They're probably like at like around the bottom of Rogue right now. I kind of overestimated them in my last tier list because I thought like I just didn't anticipate how many people would be playing just anti-tier decks and just like play anti-meta. Anti-meta is almost like half of the meta right now, so I don't even know if you can really call it anti-meta. There's so many anti-meta decks running around, so you have to be able to beat both tier and anti-meta, and unfortunately heroes really struggle under graveyard hate. Even just shufflers can do a lot to stop hero plays. So yeah, I don't know, I would put it like at the bottom of Rogue. Still, like Dark Law is a hell of a card, but if there's one deck that loves to summon Dark Law and is actually like really good right now, it's this one, you know. Next up we can do Tri-Brigade. Tri-Brigade is, I would say, like just playable. Just doesn't play very well into the multiple hand traps people are playing. Doesn't play well at all under shufflers or stuff like that. I'd still say it's like better than the rest of the decks in playable here, but I wouldn't even say it's quite Rogue. Honestly, if you're playing some type of graveyard hate in your deck and you're playing against Tri-Brigade, like you're feeling so good because it's going to be such an easy matchup. Obviously, they can set up some really incredible boards if they go uninterrupted. So like, that's the case for a lot of decks that are like playable, you know what I mean? So like, I'm not trying to say it's not a good deck at all. It's just not like the format for it whatsoever. Graveyard hate absolutely shits on it. Tier limit is just way better in almost every facet. So there's like really no reason to play Tri-Brigade, I would say right now. Another really cool deck, really good one, I would say the Vernu variant of Adamancipators. I've been seeing quite a bit, getting some results. It's a really strong deck. I love to be able to say that Adam is still relevant and prevalent, and it definitely is. A lot of people are going for like an almost stun variant, setting up the Earth Barrier statue and doing that stuff, and just the Vernus in general, adding some extra consistency to the deck is really strong. Of course, it kind of ruins their excavations a little bit, but from what you can see from this deck, like it kind of makes them depend less on the excavations when they get that boost in consistency from the Vernus. So it's actually a really good synergy. Also, they can play like a pile with some shufflers and some millers and stuff like that. So it's a pretty interesting deck. I don't know if I really agree with the pile variant, but I haven't played a lot of Adamancipators this format, so I'm not going to give you my opinion on it. I'm just going to say, generally speaking, from what I've seen, this is a really solid deck. Of course, you know what Adamancipator does. It goes first and it makes the opponent scoop because they don't want to sit through your combo. But even going second, depending on what your opponent sets up, Adamancipators can play through quite a bit of interruption, especially with the Vernusylph variant, because the Vernus are good at giving you a couple of ways of baiting out some interruptions before you can like go for your main plays or stuff like that. So yeah, definitely a lot of gas in this deck. I would say it's really solid. Now, for a deck I think is criminally slept on, Branded Tier. Why are people sleeping on this deck? Okay, here's the thing about Branded Tier, okay? Yes, it is worse than just regular tier limit, but Branded Tier has some advantages to it, okay? A lot of people are on Dimensional Shifter, on Dimensional Fissure, stuff like that. This deck does not care nearly as much about that. You can at least do branded plays if you're under that and set up a couple of things just from your branded engine. So I feel like that extra safety you get, because if you were just playing tier and your opponent goes D-Shifter, you're not playing. If your opponent goes D-Shifter and you're playing tier, like at best you're setting up a Baguska. With this deck, you can actually like set up a Mirror Jade, set up some back row, some stuff like that. So I definitely think this deck is a little bit slept on. I think Despia Tier has some advantages to it. Even though I would say it's worse against shufflers, it's better against other forms of graveyard hate that banish your graveyard. So that's why I would put it in this spot over here. Next up, another great pick, Rika Sun Avalon. I would probably put this right above Adamancipators. Rika Sun Avalon is a really strong combo deck. I played against it today and they bricked, so maybe they had a bad build, or maybe the deck can actually brick and I just never experienced that before. But overall, I mean, if you guys seen what this deck does, it's basically the new Drytron. It's the deck that if it goes first, it has so many starters for its combo, because it literally just combos off of a single normal monster, and there's so many ways to get to it. I think it has like something insane, like 14 starters for their combo. And yeah, they just set up a bunch of interruptions, really hard to play around. The tributing stuff for cost is really good, because if you use the tribute for cost effect, it's not going to trigger the tiers in the graveyard, so it plays pretty well into tiers when it's going first. The thing about this deck though is it does kind of struggle going second depending on what your hand is looking like, so I think putting it on the lower end of tier 2 is fair. It's still a really insane combo deck, probably the best combo deck in terms of just like the board it sets up in the current format. All right, so that's gonna do it for this list here. Let me know what you guys think. Oh wait, I forgot. Penguin best deck. Penguin best deck, of course. So yeah, that's gonna do it for this list. Thank you guys so much for checking out the video. Let me know what you guys think in the comments. This is a pretty weird format. It's pretty hard to pin down. I think the general placements are good. Maybe like specific picks, like where the order is for different categories is maybe a little off. So you guys can tell me what you think in the comments. That's gonna be it for me. As always, a huge shout out to my Ultimate Conductor tier members. That would be Raptor Rapture, Bongerman for 20, Dad Dude Joey, as well as B-Dubs, Hit or Miss JT, JQ the King, you who's liking, commenting, subscribing, doing all that good stuff. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much. Okay, peace.